My guest today started as a backup dancer in Los Angeles. Then he went to war. Then SpaceX, then Northrop Grumman, then Harley-Davidson. And at every single stop, he kept finding the same broken system hiding in the same place, the seam where road and rail are supposed to hand off to each other. Nobody had fixed it. Not the military, not the biggest aerospace companies in the world, not anyone. So Kevin Damoa built the fix himself. He's the founder and CEO of Glīd Technologies, and what he's building could reshape how freight moves across the country and how supplies reach our troops in contested environments around the world. This one is layered, and I couldn't wait to sit down with him. Welcome to 50 Chairs and the Kevin Damoa story. All right, we're in. We're live.
We're live.
Well, Kevin, you and I had a chance to chat a little bit previously, and I'll give you a little bit of the backdrop of 50 Chairs as we kind of went through this. But how I came to know you was through Mike Sherbakoff. I said, "Hey, Mike, I'm looking for some incredible founders to talk to." And I said, "Who's at the top of your list?" And Mike said to me, "Kevin Damoa," like without hesitation. So I was like, "All right, well then I need to talk to Kevin." And I know you've been on a whirlwind of both exciting successes with TechCrunch, Disrupt Win, and just a lot going on, and new hires, and all the things that are going on with you. So I'm super grateful that you joined us today on 50 Chairs. And I shared a little bit of that journey. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the honor is absolutely mine. So sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine, man. I shared a little bit of the context of 50 Chairs with you. As you know, my dad was a pastor and started a church. And part of that learning as I was growing up was it really takes a lot of conviction when you set out those chairs at the beginning and no one's there. And as I've read and kind of come up to speed on your story, man, there's no shortage of 50 chair moments. But for the audience, Kevin has been at all of the companies that you have seen in the headlines recently, SpaceX, Harley-Davidson. I had one more on my list. I mean, you've been a lot of places. And before that, even that journey started in the military, and then before that in LA. So I want to start kind of at the beginning.
Yeah.
So back, not with SpaceX, not with the military, but the one story that Mike did tell me that I was like, that is interesting. He's like, the one thing you may not know about Kevin is he was a backup dancer in LA. So I want to start there. So walk me through that. What was happening? Like what was that journey?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to hear more of that story.
Yeah, of course. So dancing and art is a big piece of my life. It's in everything that is around me. If you watch me, publicly or live, I'm always tapping into like that music in my mind. It's just going. I grew up dancing, and I called the dancer, and loved hip hop and being a b-boy. Supposed to go to college for dancing and ended up joining the Army instead. It was during 9/11. I said, do I want to support this nation or do I want to go entertain? And I felt God put me on this earth to earn my keep and, I could serve in this nation. But, after, I got back to Iraq, 2 tours in Iraq, I said, a cat only has 9 lives. I use already. I'm going to go dance. So moved to California to pursue the California dream. And, I got recruited as a backup dancer. Everybody knows the dancer's journey. Live in a dancing house, with a bunch of other dancers. You eat ramen noodles and Vienna sausages because you're not getting paid a lot. And you're going to auditions all the time. So I got picked up to be a backup dancer. I danced for about 6 months. I was doing choreography and contemporary hip hop as well. And then the San Diego fires happened. I was down in San Diego at the time and actually went down to be a volunteer firefighter. And I saw that I loved it. I said, well, the Lord has called me to doing this mission. So I quit dancing and I went to go fight fires, man. National Guard and fought for almost. So, yeah.
Wow, man. Wow. Well, that's kind of an amazing journey to kind of go through,
Mhm.
from backup dancer to military to firefighting. And I do want to pick up on a theme here because I know that you mentioned, God was part of that decision for you. And I will say, and, some of the conversations that I have around this, the 50 chair story, the part that I don't talk about a lot is, as my father was going through that, and setting out those 50 chairs, he was doing it because he felt a calling on his life. And I feel like, entrepreneurship can kind of be a calling of sorts. And you talked about hearing that voice and saying, "Hey, this is what I need to go
Yeah.
do." So,
Mhm.
do you mind walking through that a little bit? It's not normally where I go, but since we were
Yeah.
there, do you mind talking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's in the Bible it says, "Be still and send me," right? And I take that literally, and I've done that with every single thing that I've done in my life. My favorite book growing up was Ecclesiastes, so it talked
Mm,
a lot about wisdom and knowledge and how do you accumulate things. So I combined, the teachings of Ecclesiastes with those two terms of being still, sitting with, where you are in the moment and the gifts that God bestowed onto you, um, and being sent for a purpose that is outside of our desire. My desire was to dance, and to do things in life that made me feel fulfilled, um, and really pour to others. God provided me with gifts and logistics and operational excellence, building things to serve that aren't always fun. They're probably the toughest and most mundane things to do to move us people, where I had to pay attention to calling. Even though it's placed me in harm's way, more ways than I still, I'm here to serve while I'm still inside of it. So,
So let's go back a little bit further. So when you were growing up, I know you shared a little bit of kind of your origin story, but you shared that your family's Panamanian. You were out in LA. What what did success look like for you? Like when Kevin was thinking about like, hey, future Kevin, this is the road that he's gonna follow.
mhm.
What did that look like for you? What did you think was gonna happen?
I thought I was gonna be an entertainer, man. I thought I was gonna be this like big like superstar because I dance, I sing, I play instruments, and I write. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be the next Usher. I'm gonna be Usher mixed with El General and Tego Calderon, and I'm gonna be that guy. That was like, this is what I'm working towards. I played sports, I was in great shape, but like entertainment was where I directed a lot of my energy growing up. To entertain folks, I did like talent shows, and I was a part of like a boy band. I was in every single church choir. My parents wanted to go to. My mom she hopped around from church to church denomination, growing up, and I always, participated in all the musical things in church. So I knew for a fact my path was to be that, that next Usher Raymond. And I didn't plot a course outside of that, right? I was always fascinated with, building things. I was into like Fast and Furious and building my own cars and everything else, but that was always an entrance into entertaining others. Was where my personal pursuit was as far back as I can remember.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So do you think that some of that background, I mean, they always say like looking backwards, you can always connect all the dots, but do you think some of that background has helped you in what you're doing now? Like, do you see a through line in like, hey, those experiences were not wasted experiences, because they've actually helped me develop into the thing that I'm doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it all tells a story. If you follow like my timeline, you'll see a lot of like art and music and just a unifying of things, a harmony in what we do here at Glide as well. Everything we do is dual purpose, is duality, the road and rail and commercial and defense. Nationwide to international, and the music that we put together is like trap meets rock and roll. When you see a lot of the things here, it's always a play on how do you combine things that sit on opposite sides of things and make them beautiful into one. So a lot of entertainment into what I do. I believe that, being a storyteller, uh, as well as, a founder is kind of like a musician, where musicians have to, tell their story through their music and through their performance. I feel as a CEO, I'm doing the exact same thing. I worked in sales, quite a bit in my time, during my professional time, from selling concrete to power tools, doing contracting within the military as well. Me, pitch customers and investors and win the hearts and minds of customers and believers in our community as well, as we
Mm.
build out you know, this mission. So
Yeah. I asked you that question because there's a lot of young folks who are, this AI disruption that's happening is unfortunately affecting, this particular group, 18 to 24, right? And I think
mhm.
looking backwards, you can always see like, oh yeah, man, that experience. Like, so I did door to door right out of college, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I graduated, there were no jobs, and so I went into sales, and if you had asked me at that moment of time, did I love that? No, I did not love that. But I mean, it was door to door, straight commission
yeah,
sales. It
yeah,
was like the worst kind of
yeah.
sales, the hardest kind of
Are you sell
sales.
are you selling, were you selling baseball tickets?
No, no. So it's interesting. We were outsourced feet on the street program. So we worked for like AT&T and Quest and this will date me, AOL. Like, there was a, I should have left the AOL out of that.
Yes, it's okay, man. We'll edit it out.
Yeah. But that was an uncomfortable part of my journey, and I wouldn't have chose that myself. But looking backwards, when I went into the classroom, I was able to see in retrospect that those 3-minute pitches that I had to do to those business owners made me such an incredible teacher because I felt like my job was to convince these students to like listen to me, to find importance. I was used to that like 3-5 minute kind of get you interested. And that's incredibly important in teaching. And so as people are listening to this and people
Yeah,
thinking about like their future, it's like, hey, it may not always make sense at the time, but there is this through line. I can see it in the work that you do, that that
yeah,
that kind of coolness factor that comes through in even in the
yeah,
design
yeah,
of
yeah.
your even in the design of your vehicle. So I love that, man.
Thank you,
So
brother. I appreciate that.
yeah, of course, of course. So when you said that, you felt that 9/11 hit and you felt like you were, called to go serve. Walk me through that. So as I read the story, you're working in some pretty tough situations and you're living the problem that you're solving now.
Mhm.
And so you're in walk the audience through that scene. Like, what was the origins of like where were you? And then the moment you realized like this is a problem. And I
Yeah.
know this problem has happened several times in the other companies that you've been with, but let's start with the
Yeah.
military chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. So Army, a third ACR, brave rifles to all my brave rifle folks out there. And that's when we were armored cavalry. They're a regular cavalry regiment now. And they go on to light. But first tour in Iraq, we were like, hey, bring your Bradleys and your tanks up. We got to move this stuff from this point to this point. Process is called rail heading. We have to move the tanks, Bradleys, and all of our equipment from road to rail. And we have to do this all ourselves. We are it. And they're explaining to us the process. And it's like, hey, roll up to the train and lash this down with some chains and turnbuckles. And we're out there all day. It's blazing hot. We're exposed to everything. It's like sitting ducks. And work is imagine 20 to 100,000 pounds of things hanging in the air, which you have to put down and then latch down. There has to be a better way, and then, this is the only way, and I'm like, it can't be. Army is so advanced that, we have all this money. This is like Flintstones, man. They're like, oh man, this is how we're gonna do it, and so do your job. And I would leave the army with that discussion, and then go on to the commercial side and start to look at ports railroad operations and see that that's the exact same way that everyone's, so I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to live with the problem. So, let's fast forward, I'm age myself, fast forward 15 years. And I'm like, well, COVID-19 is now happening. And I'm like, well, why are these ships in the ports and not being able to get offload fast enough? And you start to look at the diagram. You're like, well, these guys aren't offloaded fast enough. These tall stacks aren't getting processed fast enough. And then these trains aren't happening at all. Like you have a line of trucks at the gate because they're not doing that operation because it's expensive, it's slow, and it's very, very dangerous. And I felt like it was a God again tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, you know how to fix this now. I put you at SpaceX where you did, movement of rockets. I put you at, Northrop Grumman where you're doing F-35. And then I give you, 4 startups doing electrification. You now have all your tools to solve this problem. So it's either you keep making bicycles or you go out and you be still and so I left Harley-Davidson and started at Glīd and been gliding ever since.
Well, what was the, each one of those, I mean, you think about logistics, and logistics seems like this, some kind of unsexy business
Yes.
of sorts. But as I was reading about kind of the briefing on the rail and understanding what happened, as I understand, there's 140,000 short line across the U.S.
Yeah, it's 150,000 complete miles. Short lines have, I think, 61,000 of that number.
Yep.
Interesting thing about that number is 1916, we had 250,000 linear miles of rail within the United States. With now that number being down at 140,000, with the amount that we lost, they're now walking trails.
Really? So they were
Absolutely.
converted.
They're converted due to underutilization.
Okay. And so as I was kind of looking at, okay, so you've got all of this capacity that was kind of sitting there. And then I believe there was a law that was passed that kind of changed how rail worked. And so these short lines basically got underutilized. And so you saw this, so-called declining usage as an opportunity. What was the spark? Like, how did you know? Was it just through experience as you kind of went through this and said, look, there's like so much rail out there. If we could combine both rail and, off rail, we could really utilize this. What was that moment for you where that light bulb went off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was a lot of research. It was the pain from the past mixed with the learnings from the journey, and then digging deep with the stakeholders. And when I say the stakeholders, I mean the shippers, the railroad operators, the drayage folks, and then the communities that these rail lines, actually operate in, and marginalized communities at that. These are folks that at the peak of rail, had bus towns, right? And now these communities are poverty, and inundated with, abuse, name your abuse, drug abuse, alcohol, whatever it may be, because those away as that rail line declined and died in a lot of these instances. So that was my big carrot. I support the community. The next was, you know, we've invested all this time and money and resources into this infrastructure that can actually, literally reindustrialize America. If we look at near shore and move things faster, we're only utilizing one corridor because it's really accessible, while the other corridor just stays dormant. And that corridor, mind you, is more efficient, it's more effective, and it's cheaper across the board. Talk about bringing down the cost of goods sold, the cost of eggs, and fighting tariffs. You shift things over to that mode, and you directly impact the way that goods are processed in our stores, right? So those are the items that I wrote in on. And the last piece was like, I can make this sexy. Right. So take existing legacy systems.
So I want to dig into that. I was a couple weeks ago. I was at an event with Kathy Wood, and she was talking about the amount of investment that went into AI, and there was a 150-year horizon. So it was looking at the investment in rail, and rail was like at the tail end of this, and then you've got AI, right, as the new boom, right, and the amount of money going into AI is way outpacing the rail, and even the dot com boom and all of that stuff. If you look at it over the long tail, what
Hmm.
I think is really interesting about what you're doing is that you're on both ends of this spectrum. And you talked about these communities. I can only imagine that during that first railroad boom, these communities were bustling because of as rail was getting invested, that meant jobs. And then as that has declined, um, I don't want to say that that's a forgotten part of the community, but I would imagine as you've been doing this, you're seeing areas that just were left behind.
Absolutely.
And so, talk me through a little bit of what that's like. Is that part of the mission? Is there a social aspect to, hey, we want to revital? Not only does it make sense to revitalize these short lines from an economic perspective, but it also makes sense from a social well-being perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a core part of our thesis, is to, build around these communities, as we look at, the silver jobs, right? The silver age jobs, are the hard working, back breaking blue collar jobs are starting to go away because, the new generations coming in, are looking at, AI jobs to, do the work. Whereas we can, take a technology like Glide and inject ourselves into these communities and provide them with real generational wealth in the form of next gen jobs and education to bolster an industry that is essential like logistics so that we don't have these marginalized communities, right? Technology is what lifts communities up to an economic level so that they can, push the economy up at the exact same time. I'm looking at, rail adjacent towns, port adjacent towns, and then towns where, distribution centers and e-commerce have lend itself to. You have, Amazon and Walmart facilities on all these places that are about a quarter of a mile to a half a mile from a railroad track that is now dormant, that is adjacent to a community that whose job is only to do warehousing jobs with a lot of those jobs being automated, and those jobs don't come outside of the facility. So now with our technology, as robotics goes in, now we can train folks on jobs on the outside to, bolster their economy, leverage existing infrastructure for what it is with very, very little lift, and still inject capital into these communities to build them out as they service those main corridors is the thought process behind that. So that's a key piece of our business. And we're doing it slowly. So we're going, city by city, town by town, county by county, state by state. And eventually we want to break out into the world, but definitely want to be a big part of the mechanism as a part of American reindustrialization as we, push the nation forward.
Yeah, I love that part of the mission, and the more I've kind of learned about rail, it's such a I don't know if you maybe I'm just being Pollyannish about this, but there's something about being on a train that I
Yeah.
say that is very different way of travel, right? Even as a customer of, Amtrak and traveling, I did a trip once from DC to Florida, very different on a train. You get to see, I don't know, I feel like you get to enjoy that journey a little bit more than you do on a plane, right? Not fast.
Absolutely. Yeah, not fast. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely being still. I mean, you have
Mhm.
nothing to pay attention and be present while you're on a train, man. I mean, it's so historical. I mean, it gives me chills thinking about it now. The first real big, after the horse and carriage, right, was the industrialization or the of trains. Like trains are what connected our nation together via the transcontinental railroad. So think about that invention and what it did to our economy as Americans. And the next, big leap was containerization. But between those two, I mean, it changed the course of the world. And then, of course, roads came up and, trucks, started to do its thing. But, those rail lines are still there and they still move a lot of American and other industries around the world. But they could move a lot more, is our point, right?
And that is your mission.
Yes, sir. That's our mission. Yes.
So when I've talked about this, I've called it kind of the ugly middle or the wilderness. When you first set out, I'm sure when you started telling people, "Hey, I've got this idea. It's going to be a train and a car." And I feel like that's like with everything that's going on, it's like maybe almost like what?
Yeah.
Kevin's talking about trains. We're talking
Yeah.
about like drones and flying and he's like, "No, no, no, no. Let me explain this to you."
Yes.
And I feel like every entrepreneur has that moment when something is new and innovative and people just don't quite get it yet. Talk me through what was that like for you as you were like, "Hey, I see a real problem.
Hmm.
I've lived it. I've
Yes.
lived it through multiple companies now." But then when you say it out loud to somebody who doesn't quite understand it, what was that like as you were setting out those initial chairs and talking to people about what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it was a tough journey, to be honest. I mean, it's it's laughable now where we are, but in the beginning, I was like, it just as the founder that sees it all happen in real time, and you have the war wounds from it all, and you can point to all the data, right? That is
Mm.
like, dude, this is like out there. It's like it's exposed. There's a lot to it. If you just pull on a little bit of these threads to expose it more, you explain what you're gonna do, and they're like, "Wow, man, that sounds like some like sci-fi Jetson stuff, bro." Like, yeah, you're probably like a decade out from where this is. Even though you explain, hey, the problem is like now there's like 120 million people that are impacted by the same problem. There's like billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars that this problem, that is paid towards this problem for it to go away, but it never does. You show the statistics and then you show the solution, and it doesn't add up. So words didn't do it, so we put it in CAD and then showed images of it. That didn't do it. It was like, wow, that's a great thing, but I don't think it's not in our lifetime. And then it all happens, right? COVID happened. Then you had geopolitical tensions that happened, and then you started to see catastrophic failures throughout the United States start happen, right? And that directly affected, our American tables, where folks are like, oh, well, how is this impacting us? Oh, the rails are. This is the reason. The roads and the rails and the boats, man,
Mm.
who's going to help this? Who's going to solve this? Right. And, it's like, hey, we've been hiding in plain sight. We've been, actually jumping up and down saying that we're here. But I think it's time and place, for everything. Working at SpaceX when I first joined, no one believed that we were going to launch rockets, recover them, then relaunch them again. To that point, they were throwing first stages into the oceans, and SpaceX had to show them, hey, this is a possibility. And I feel, as entrepreneurs, it is our responsibility to demonstrate while we educate folks on how we solve this big problem, right? We can't put something in front of a person and say, "Hey, you figure it out. It looks great, right? Now you figure the rest out." No, it's a continuous, education on the why, right? And the re-education on the why while you evolve the product offering at the same exact time. Because as emerging technologies comes, it introduces more problems. So we have to evolve that and then teach why that our solution is still the right solution for that new problem that popped up because of this new technology that has evolved. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like as I'm listening to your story, entrepreneurs, when you pitch that first couple people, if you're lucky, you get in front of somebody that really understands it and maybe probably just believes in you.
Yeah.
And I know you and I have a mutual colleague who in Josh Bear, who, as you know, recently passed. And I just would be remiss if we didn't pause and just acknowledge for me and for you. Josh had an important role for Living Tree. He was the one that introduced me to my then future acquirer. And there was just something about him. I was early days and I was talking about my vision and he saw something in me that honestly, I don't think I saw in myself, but it made me believe. And I saw your post on LinkedIn. How important are those moments as you're walking through and describing to people what's happening and you meet a Josh Bear who says, "Man, Kevin, I believe in your vision, and not only I believe in your vision, I'm going to open doors." And I don't, and you're like, "I don't understand why this guy's doing this."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Joshua was he's a titan. Like I said in my post, man. You know what he's done. You know for the community is amazing. He's opened up doors for all of us to actually solve some of the toughest problems in the world. The folks that are courageous and brave enough to do things, he's the one that planted seeds in order for us to grow into who we are today. You know, I call him the seed planter, and I know a lot of folks call him the seed planter. I have this saying that I love quite a bit, where we know as leaders we plant seeds and for trees that we'll never be able to enjoy the shade from, and that's just Joshua. You know, Joshua planted seeds and watered them, as he liked to say. You know that are growing into great successful companies, from Firehawk to Firestorm to Glide, within itself, just by the kindness of his heart. He didn't have to do any of this. You know, he didn't have to help you out to do it, but he's ways where he can have incremental gains, or not him specifically, but us as a community can have incremental gains through people. Right. I feel that we're all conduits, and there's certain ones of, it's like a theory of mine. There's certain people out there that just see the conduits walking and say, "Oh, I'm going to grab onto this person," or "I hope this person comes to me," or we're brought to their door and they're like, "Yeah, come on in, man. I saw you coming." Right. And that's the impression that, Joshua always had on me, man. Yeah, I miss him. I miss him. He's an incredible man. And, we're going to push harder because of, the belief that he has, in all of us. So yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for mentioning.
Yeah, of course. I feel like I'd be remiss if we didn't today. So as you've been out there and building, how important I saw your wall. We talked about this early on. You've got no shortage of just reminders of great people, and surrounding yourself with that imagery. I know, as you told us your background, I know how important that is. I've talked about athletes and visualization. Someone said the 50 chairs was like, for my dad, a way of visualizing something that didn't exist yet. How important have mentors been, and how have you kind of found them as you're kind of going through, and making your collection, or that board, or if they become a board member? What part of
Yes.
the journey has mentors played in your journey?
A steady a steady support channel for me, for a lot of my blind spots. It takes a lot for a lot of us to surrender, whole self, so that we can take those learnings. I've had my entire life, I've been surrounded by folks that wanted to pour into me, and I had to stop and listen. I stop and listen a lot more now. And yeah, the journey just places these folks at the time they're supposed to be, chronologically or systematically, whatever you want to call it, and seasons in your life that is needed. And I have the ability to surrender to those moments. Where I have like folks like Pablo Ukar, or Mike Sherbakov, or Ryan Micheletti, or Jordan Kretschmer, or Tim Draper, tap me in the shoulder and say, "Hey, I see something in you, but these are your blind spots. Would you sit and listen?" That's easier said than done, right? It was a point in my life where I was like, "Hey, would you sit and listen?" I was like, "Now I'm on a move. If you want to run with me, we can run together." But you're missing the whole story. So the advice that I would give to anybody out there, if this is a place where I can give advice, is to listen to the lessons that are given to you and pointed out to you. They come in all shapes, forms, and sizes and opportunities. We were at an event yesterday, 2 days ago. So my times are off in Long Beach, just, talking with customers and potential partners and stuff like that. And I had the lovely moment to meet with a woman named Bonnie Nixon. And Bonnie Nixon, if anybody wants to do research on her, is this huge innovator, for logistics. She's helped out ports to, push them into next gen, arenas to be successful, right? As we, tackle commercialization and everything else. And, we talked for like an hour, and in that small session, she dropped me with a bunch of different pieces of knowledge. So on the fly mentorship is really, really important as well. It doesn't have to be, something as formal as an advisor or a mentor or board member. Mentorship comes in momentary things as well. We just have to sit and digest and sit with those lessons in those moments.
So you mentioned surrender, and that's not a word I hear very often, except maybe in church.
Yeah.
And I feel like, maybe it's worth kind of going through just a little bit of that in terms of my definition of surrender, and you tell me if this is what you meant by that, is more a posture of your heart and your mind, not a
Yes.
physical surrender to, anything that comes your way, but a openness to God's will and calling and whatever that might look like. And that might be a small moment or a big moment, but just having a posture of surrender.
Yes.
Is that how you would define surrender?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it isn't the lay down and say, "Hey, come and take me." No, it's it is. Yeah, it is as you explained it, a posture and sense to be fully open to the lesson as it is, right? I think the thing that keeps us from, the lessons that we have is that external shell, that ego, that pride that says I have enough, where your vessel is partially empty or more than empty, right? You're on your bottom, but your vessel is still at a posture of strength where you should be receiving that lesson. So surrender allows you to open all the way up from a posture in order to get your cup filled by those lessons that come from surrender, I feel.
Yeah, and I feel like I love that idea of on the fly mentorship, right? Because a lot of
Right.
times you, as a founder, you think about this like, oh, I need, a mentor. I want this person on my board. But, sometimes it's just a season. Sometimes it's just a conversation that you
Yes.
needed at that moment, right? So it doesn't have to be this big, complicated, formal thing. It can be just hey, I had this amazing conversation and that changed my thinking on something that, was placed on my heart or something that, the business is going through. So don't make it so formal if you don't have to. Not
Yeah.
every relationship.
No, not at all. Because I mean, eventually you'll run out of stuff, man. If the person only has so much to give you, and they serve their purpose. If something's formal, you're like, I don't know why you're still why you're still around. It becomes a place of tension now. It's like I have to keep you around due to responsibility, but the lessons that you were meant to provide for me were only supposed to serve me over this short amount of time. So I think it's good to pay attention to that.
So as you're starting Glide and you're thinking about all of the things that are gonna, you're just getting going. What, everybody sees, I saw the big moment with TechCrunch Disrupt, which is amazing. I mean, I
Yeah,
loved it.
thank
I
you.
saw that on LinkedIn. I was like, oh gosh, that's wonderful and validation. But the
Yes.
part that people don't see is like those early days. And so, what were the things that you kind of got wrong that you didn't anticipate? You were like, "Hey, I, I got the idea. I got this mission. I'm going to do stuff," and then stuff isn't working.
Yes, absolutely. In the beginning, it was like, yeah, in order for me to raise money or to make, my technology feel like it's real, I need to surround myself with big, logos, like folks that have like mounds of experience and that have worked for like the Apples and the Googles or whatever it may be in order to make my technology seem like it's relevant. Right. For me, that was a big mistake, right? Because what we're creating is something that's new that legacy systems may not, impact in a positive way. It may root it in something that, is wrong. The other one is identifying, how to really go to market, right? We all want to go to market with that, sexy, futuristic thing that is going to just save everybody's lives, but takes millions and millions of dollars and many years in order to certify and to make safe and to put in place. Was the other mistake that, I led with is like, you know what? I got this big, sexy machine. It's going to just change the world immediately. Just pay for it, right? So go back to basics, identify, how you're going to solve the problem at its most, primitive level, demonstrate that, and then evolve it over time. Is the lesson that I, got through that obtained through that. And then the next lesson was aligning with the right people that, want to go on with the mission. And not everybody is fit for that time period, right? Yeah. It's, I think that everyone, like seasons, folks have seasons, and you have some folks that are with you for several seasons. It could be with you all the way into the end, and other folks are meant to, get you to a certain posture, and they've served their purpose. So to not be too attached, to the idea that, hey, this person is going to carry me to forever, but acknowledge that, hey, this may be a temporary thing, to get us to where we need to be next. So
Yeah. Well, I saw that you are you're building the team out, and as a CEO, you mentioned early on, like some of those folks, like the Drapers of the world, can help you see your blind spots. And so I feel like part of the trick of being an entrepreneur is understanding what you're really, really, really good at, and then what you may not be, really good at, and you need to either hire for or learn yourself.
mhm.
Where are you in terms of that CEO archetype?
Yeah,
And what were some of the blind spots that people, if you're comfortable sharing, that said,
always.
"Hey, Kevin, you're amazing at this, but
Yeah.
you could use some support around these things."
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the person that wants to do everything. I want to design it. I want to build it. I want to sell it, right? I want to sustain it. I want to operate it. I want to plan for it. I want to raise for it. I want to do it all, right? I want to be, the one man band, right? I want to be Quincy Jones, who's back on the wall as well, right? That can just do it all, the orchestrator, and you find quickly that you run out of bandwidth very fast, right? You can only be superhuman for so long before you start to crack because kryptonite is all around us. So, what I would say, personally about myself is like being able to, disseminate and accept help. For the area to free me up so I can do the things best, to relinquish, some of that control to competent, folks so that they can steer, the company in a direction that it needs to, so we can verticalize it through pillars and displace out instead of it just being a spear. Right now we have, a rope of many strands that are braided together to pull this mission, forward. And that's where, a lot of my blind spots were. Glide is my baby. It's everything that I've worked for. It's the culmination of my entire career, is my love note to logistics. But being able to share that page with other folks, I mean, it's something that I've struggled with, for some time, and now starting to, recruit great team members, around me that are like, hey, you know what, man, I can really take this from you and fulfill your mission and dream probably better than you can, but we'll still align, with it. And me being able to, back to that word, surrender to that ideal of it, is propelling us forward in so many different ways. So
Amazing, man. Yeah, that I think that is a tough thing to do as a founder, is to let go of the reins to people that to help the company grow, right? There's only so many places Kevin can be at
yeah,
once.
absolutely. I try to be in all the places, man, but it comes with a sacrifice, right? You,
Mm,
you can't
yeah.
be everywhere. So, and I'm not going into a cloning machine. So it's
Well, you tempted me with that one. We could talk about that for a while.
yeah,
I've been experimenting with agents recently, and what a
yeah,
what a what a crazy world.
crazy world.
So once you get past this kind of wilderness phase of like, having this vision, and then, you're working on it, you're iterating on it, and then you pitch it, right? And I was
Hmm.
reading online that your very first customer, Taylor Transport, he said, "Man, I didn't think this technology would be available in my lifetime."
Hmm.
What a validating moment I'm sure that had to be, when someone who's like, "Hey, this I see the problem and I wanna buy the solution that you're
Yes.
providing." Talk to me how did that happen, and what did that mean for you both personally as a founder, but then also for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were, going around knocking on doors and doing market research and pitching the product. At that time it was you know, a paper, napkin, sketch, and an idea, right? With a bone squad of one or two, of us, going door to door, and sitting down with railroad operators and truckers, drayage truckers, and construction folks as well, that move their stuff. And Mike Leboki, president and CEO of Taylor Transport, was all three at one time. Has worked in transportation his whole life, loved transportation, loved logistics, started out driving truck, and now he's running this big, great, trucking company, railroad company, and construction company in Vancouver, Washington. And to sit down with him and to explain the story and to see his eyes light up and say, I needed this like 25 years ago, was the most validating thing. And for him to say, I always ask folks why this isn't being done, you know, why aren't we leveraging more rail? I have rail sitting in my backyard, and I barely see any, cargo move down it. I can even put my own truck or my own product, on that thing because I don't have enough to fulfill it. And for him to say, yeah, you guys are the next thing up was like winning the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Stanley Cup all at the same time, very, very early on. This was 2023, right? Before, Glide was like a name at all, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we got Crunchers Up in 2020. We got our first venture funding in 2025, and then got our first opportunity to be on something that is worth anything in 2024 through the Veterans Fund. A little bit before that was for the automated vehicle conference where they let me take the stage. But 2023, it was like, you guys are dreamers, right? You guys are smoking the best stuff on the planet, and you guys are way outside of what reality is. And then for him to say yes was really validating. He's still a very, very firm supporter in Glide, and we're working towards fulfilling that contractual agreement that we settled on in 2023. So
Wow.
yeah.
So, how did you? I think a lot of founders will find this, or people that are thinking about this, right? Because this is this tension that always exists in the early days. Maybe I'm assuming to build what you guys are building is not cheap.
Great
Maybe
word.
that's an understatement, but kind of what I've seen of it, I can imagine that this is not cheap technology to build, and not just the technology, but the platform, across GPS denied areas in the dual use context. So there's a lot that would go into building something like this, maybe more than maybe most founders, think about, right? So this is a heavy investment. How did you go in and what it is that you were doing so that he could see that vision, but also believe that Kevin's going to deliver on this? It's not just this thing. Yeah, yeah, that sounds great, Kevin, but
Yeah.
you know, are you going to be able to deliver on this? I think that's a challenge a lot of founders go through is like, okay, I sell the vision, but it's got to be more than that. So how did you go into that meeting and talk to Mike about, hey, this is what we're trying to do. How, can you join us on that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I led with why me, right? Why am I the guy to deliver this product to you, right? I think it's, one thing that folks say is like, I had this great idea to build this great product. And another thing is like, I've lived this idea to build this great product. I know how to build this product because I've been building this product my entire life in some way, shape, or form, but it just hasn't come out yet. And to provide that person with that guarantee that you are the person to do it. I've been sent to fulfill this mission hands down, and I won't quit until it's actually fulfilled. And that was the determination that Mike did, because the price came up. It's like, man, this thing is going to cost millions in order to do that. And my response was like, I can build this not for millions. I can build this quite cheaply because I know the componentry. I have the relationships. I've lived in this problem my entire life, where I can look at the units of economics, string together networks in order to assemble a product that can serve your purpose, and at the cost that I'm telling you at is going to be at, that's going to be cheaper than everything else out there, and at a time as well as a quality that is on par, but with what you suspect. And that was a conviction that he was like, yeah, like, I believe you, but I'm going to make you prove it to me. But and what you said, can you do it? And we've done it. We've raised some money, but what we've built with the capital that we've raised, we haven't raised tens and 20 and 30 and $100 million. We've raised $8 million to date, and we have three great vehicles with another one on its way, and then a software product with a full team. Where a lot of other companies raise way more money than we have, don't have a product, have a team, and it's still trying to figure it out. Well, we have product that is really ready to field with commercial contracts as well as defense contracts to pilot out, to prove out our solution. So yeah, we're making good.
That so capital efficiency. I want to stay on this out. So I did an episode with two guys that are building an electric sports car.
Let's go. Who are they?
Maybe I'll connect you guys.
Okay, cool.
But one of the things that they were talking about, I'm just wondering if this applies to you, is, they said in F1 racing, you can spend millions of dollars on a fender, like a custom light. And their approach was different. They were using off the shelf components that have millions of miles of use and test cases. And because of that, their unit of economics and their ability to deliver is, much stronger, right? So they're not, there's off the shelf things that they can kind of assemble in a new way that
Yes.
allow them to do what they're doing. Is that kind of the approach that you guys are taking here?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we do. I mean, unit economics are in commercial off the shelf products, right? Doing an integrated product that already has full certification, especially across the two, severely heavy regulatory bodies that we service, from the road side and then on the rail side, helps us get, homologation as well as speed to market very fast. We have a robust product out of the gate as well. And then, our patented moat is involved in the functionality of deployment, not so much in the actual device itself. I think folks that build that way are very smart. They can get really, really fast feedback from the market and still be able to build at a rate that is faster than others that are trying to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is there, so use the wheel, and then evolve the things that need to be evolved, right? So leveraging your secret sauce. How do you package this thing up to be different than others to serve a purpose? How do you overlay emerging technologies into that integrated product to continue to propel your product offering? And then how do you overlay a service on top of that in order to bring your cost down and your value up? Are the things that we really focus on at Glide.
Yeah, that's super smart. And just as people are listening, I think sometimes it's, what can we do? You don't have to reinvent everything in your, especially if you have a hardware product, right? You can use things that have had lots of tests and use cases and get you quick speed to market. And then learn, you're, like you said, have that secret sauce within that. And sometimes the secret sauce is just the way you assemble those things differently than anybody else, right? And so
Absolutely. Absolutely.
that's smart. And I'm sure your investors love that you are incredibly capital efficient.
Absolutely. We make a lot. We make it a little bit goes a long ways for us at Glide. So
So tell me, I know we're getting close on time here, Kevin, but there's a weight to, as I was reading the story about Iraq and some of the issues that you guys were running into there, and you were saying, hey, this is just the way it's done. You get the job done, but you're in a dual use context and you know what it's like to be that guy or girl who's having to do that. Is there a weight as you think about that in the kind of dual use context that, hey, this thing that we're building, yes, it does have, commercial use for tailored transport and others like it, but it also has a use case where the consequences are real in terms of like, could be life or death for those soldiers. Is there a weight to that for you?
oh, it's heavy for me. It's the thing that is most bounding for me. There's two big issues that I really like to address that keeps me moving. The first is that we talked about earlier, the marginalized communities that are impacted by the underutilization of infrastructure. The second one is our warfighters and our national security and the folks that have been called and have answered the call in order to, robust our national security. So, supporting the warfighter in garrison as they stage and train to deploy out to geopolitical tensions around the world, and in how they're serviced in contested environments. Logistically is something that weighs heavy on me. Out of a logistical mission, 1 out of 5 missions, there's a loss. There's a life that's lost during doing logistical missions. Right, convoys that are going out to pick up scrap pieces of equipment to bring it back to base so that we don't leave IP in the enemy's hands, and those convoys being decimated where you could have sent, Raiden, out to go get that stuff. If Raiden's loss is no big deal. But, circumstances like that, or even railhead operations where you don't need to have, troops at the line side to, move their munitions from road to rail. They can just be, at the point of embarkation and debarkation on either side to receive it while the thing does its thing along the way. And then the commander, looks at Ezra 1.6, which is our software, to ensure that it's proceeding as planned. And that saves lives, saves time, it saves effort, and it deploys American dollars into things that we really need to deploy into, like medicine. So yeah, those that's my pull.
Yeah, that's I think when I first was learning about Glide, I did not see all of the social aspects of you're like, hey, it's a railroad.
Yeah, yes, yes, yes.
But there's a lot to this, and I can see why people are attracted to this mission, the mission that you guys are on, in terms of just the problem you're solving, but the effects that has both in the commercial and dual use space. So incredibly proud of the work that you're doing, man. Cool stuff. And that it would do this all autonomously is like next level.
Yeah, let's go.
That's let's go, man.
What's human in the loop? I mean, we want to employ folks. So I mean, you think about it from a next gen job perspective. Now we have like digital twin operators, and we have mechanics that service things from the safety of their home, working with robotics as well. You're teaching folks that don't have degrees in engineering and automation to do things that they don't need degrees from, and provide them with paychecks that are on par with engineers is another big piece of our mission. So making logistics sexy again.
Hey, I love it. That's the new slogan. Now I know you do have a slogan
Yes,
on the
yes,
back.
yes.
Tell me about it, because when I first read it, I didn't really understand it, and then you explained it to me. Let's talk about that slogan for a second, and then I got one last question for you.
Okay, gotcha. When I look at, I've been shipping goods for a long time, right? And shipments have their own problems within it. So I say the next time you go ship it, don't ship it, just glide it, right? So gliding should be the easiest way that you move anything, right? If you think about just the movement of gliding, is effortless, right? So logistics should be effortless, and that's our main thing that we want to do at Glide, is to make your shipment and all shipments as effortless as gliding. So let's glide.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, man. Well, as you are thinking, I know you're in the middle of the fight, but as you're thinking about your journey and people who, are maybe on a different stage of that climb,
Hmm.
and you're thinking back at like early Kevin and saying, "Hey, if I was going to give advice to my younger self or someone who is at that stage, thinking, man, I want to be where Kevin's at.
Yeah.
How do I get there?"
Yeah.
What would you say to them? What would you say to yourself in that moment?
I would say keep going, right? It gets better if you believe in it, right? The mission's bigger than you. Seek help at every corner. Don't pretend to know what you don't know. Be honest and transparent about it all, and be brave. Right? Take chances. The sacrifices will pay dividends into the triumphs. So keep investing in those sacrifices, but make sure they're measured, and take care of yourself while doing so. Right? Because you are the core pillar to make things happen. And then the last thing is things aren't done alone. Seek a community and ecosystem to get you there. Whether that ecosystem is a capital factory or a new lab or a UCR, or an incubator like Antler, or an investor community like the Veterans Fund or Outlander. Seek those folks to push you forward, even if it isn't you taking money from these folks, but advice are pay dividends into you actually getting that investment. Network effects are real. So yeah,
Oh, amazing, Kevin. And I love the story. I love the mission,
thank you.
from backup dancer to changing the world
And let's ride.
and everything in between, man.
Yes.
It has been such a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your faith and the mission that you guys are on with our audience, and those 50 chairs moments that aren't the things that make the LinkedIn and the Instagram reel, but they're part of the journey, right?
Yes, sir.
So if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's I'm not a social media person, but LinkedIn is the best place to reach out to us. You can find us on our company's page as well, Glide, or our website, Glide Tech, GLID Tech. TCH.us. And if you see me at conferences, I'm there. Pull up, say hello. Gary, thank you so much for having me on this amazing platform, man, and being able to have this really, really honest and deep conversation with me. I hope that you have a blessed and abundant day, brother, in all that you do.
I want to say thank you to all the listeners of the 50 Chairs podcast. being able to bring all of these guests who can share their expertise and advice as they've gone through their 50 chairs moments has been a great joy and privilege. And if you're getting any value out of this, the best thing you can do to support our channel is to like us on Apple, on Spotify, or on YouTube, or share it with a friend who's going through their own 50 chairs moments and needs to hear one of these stories. Thanks again for listening.